Welcome everyone, Wednesdays for watercolor, which I hope I didn't accidentally mess people up by saying it was Thursday at first. Today, some friends suggested, could we try the subjects which have brick or stone or block or that kind of thing? And the idea was, how can we do them so that we don't have to paint every last brick and make it look sort of busy and fussy. So I have chosen this lovely, very old Norman church. Hello, Kathy, in Coissy in Normandy. And if I'm not mistaken, hi, James. If I remember what we were told, it's from the pre-Norman invasion of England. And there is an older portion of it here, which appears to the building had ended here first. And there was a turret or perhaps some kind of curved surface. And then this end of the building was a little newer. This is a sort of canal that's dug to connect to the River. But I was going to use this subject to talk about what are the strategies that we can use to get the effect of that. One obvious one is, and very important, and I think something that we often miss because we get excited to start the subject, is the scale that we're working. How appropriate is it to show what amount of detail is appropriate to that scale? This is an 11 by 15. So I'm going to suggest more than paint individual things. If we really do need to indicate stonework or brickwork, you want to be pretty big. We do have actually some brick over here on this section. There was it appears to be some rather large barn or carriage house from, I would imagine, 18th or 19th century that had been converted to apartments. But different strategies. The second thing, so that appropriateness of scale. Second is its texture. So what can we do to get texture? One, use rough paper. Right here I have a quarter sheet, 11 by 15 of Hanamula rough, which actually is about the same as Arches cold press. There's none of this is standard. Waterford rough would be rougher, and then Fabriano has a rough, I think it's called Esportazione, that is very, very rough, and you might use that on a large painting. But different ways we can do it. Let's go to, well, here's my friend Cindy shared this. This is in Elkhart, Illinois. It's a church. And you can see that there's some significant stonework here. One thing we might want to do is just remember our basic approach of painting light to dark. And in this area, it's primarily light. So that would go on first. And then the darker marks would go on second. In this area, it's primarily dark because it's in shade, and you might go in with the darker color first, and if you used pigments that lift rather well, and those earth tones and blues or ultramarine would do that, you could lift out the lights. That's one strategy. Here is Andrew Wyeth. You can just use the texture of the paper. You can splatter, and it's primarily light. He was trying to get a stucco barn in winter in Westchester, and then he would indicate with darks on top of the lights the cracks in the stucco or through the building, those kinds of things. So we don't have to do anything fancy. We just stick with our dark overlight and go with what the subject dictates. Here is Joseph Zbukvich. He's used the texture of the paper here, you can see, and there is either stucco or some kind of brick in this Melbourne scene, Melbourne, Australia. And because he has considered the scale that he's working, he's not tried to indicate individual bricks. He's using texture of the paper to indicate that this is a rough surface and it's not as smooth as, say, the road, which is wet, or the sky, which is far away. This is one of my own, using the same approach. I've used the texture here of the paper to, hello, Eric, to indicate the sort of whatever the material they use there. Same thing in the sidewalk here. I put down a set of colors. It was probably burnt umber and a little bit ultramarine. They lift, so I lifted out the light areas here, right there, and I painted the dark areas. So one thing to watch out for. Hi, Vicky. If your mortar or the shadows under the bricks or the stones or the block are dark, then paint the light surface and then paint those. Or if everything's dark and the mortar is light, you might use a set of pigments that lift well, and then you could lift that out. Here's another one that's an alley scene from Fairfield. I've done some lifting here in the burnt sienna transparent oxide red. I just put it down and then lifted out the areas that I wanted lights. And because of the scale here, I am suggesting the brick through the texture of the paper. Oh, thank you, Eric. Hi, Jane. Here is, boy, this guy. This appears to be some sort of Venice or Italian scene. This is Vladislav Yeliseyev, a Russian painter who lives in Sarasota, Florida, and he just excels at this sort of thing. Here he has done a very good example of using texture and indicating a few of the bricks, but not all of the bricks. He's using texture to indicate stuccoed areas. So you don't have to paint every last brick, and you don't have to paint the mortar between every brick. Hi, Lisa. You get the right ones in there, the ones that are near the focal point or in a high contrast area, and the point is made, the story is told. This is Marc Folly, a French painter. He's exploiting what the water does with the pigment to suggest texture or materials, and the backside of a, rather weathered building or an older building, and it's nearly pure abstraction. But steps, more steps, balcony, tables, that sort of thing. It gets the point across. And to suggest, show some subjects that we might try. This is a reflection in a puddle going down 4th Street in Fairfield. Here I might employ fine splatter or, the light colors first and then put the dark cracks in. Let's see, cobblestones. Here along the Seine in Paris, you would put down a sort of mottled gray-brown, and then the darks, you might put them in. But what you would do is do these mostly, a few of these, less of these, none of those. So as you go back in space, and of course, appropriateness of scale. And the same thing if you were doing something like rocks beside a river. All those kinds of things. Here's the little church behind which Monet is buried in Giverny. Stucco. Here you might put down a light gray and then lift the mortar between the stones. This I would do as texture. Maybe the rock in the plaster or mortar I would splatter. Oops. What else is there? Well, there it is. There's the whole church. Anyway, back to our subject and how we're going to treat it. So just to do a quick kind of indication of how you might do those different things. Hello, Deanne. I'm going to get something like a raw umber or a burnt umber, a slightly running mix, and a brush which is kind of, it's not super soft, but it's not super stiff. This is just a paper with cold press texture, and using a pressure that is light. You notice I'm holding it down here, and I'm letting the brush rest on the paper and pulling across, and we can get some texture like that. Then we could, where this is wet still, feed another color in there and get a bit more texture, like so. Now you can also, when it gets a little, I'm blotting that brush, drying it off, and I'm looking for the sheen. When the sheen goes off the paper here, we could lift out a light spot, and that we might do that as a dark stone with light mortar. Let's get something a little ruddier with some iron oxide red, transparent iron oxide, maybe a little bit of ultramarine blue to tame it. If you were wanting to do individual bricks, hello, Kathy. Notice this brush. It used to have quite a point. It's very old. But you notice it has a squared off tip. But you could use that to suggest some bricks. And notice stagger them. Make one side sharp and one side broken. Modify the color. You could touch a little bit of something darker to the bottom edge to indicate like a shadow. Oh, and if the light is coming from the top and the bottom edge of the brick where the stone is darker. Don't just use watercolor brushes. Now you can get a chisel shaped brush. I don't really have some good ones. Hi, Kathy. Hi, Shelley. This is a nylon bristle. If you need to make on a bigger scale, those sorts of things. The other thing is don't make them all the same value. Don't make them all the same hue. Modify it a bit. Can't talk, Andrea. So I get just a moment here. But there's that. Then also, don't just use watercolor brushes. Get your, hi Judy, get your oil painting brushes out. They will hold watercolor too, and because they're stiffer and they're not going to hold anywhere near as much paint as a watercolor brush will, you could get down on the end of the handle and you can get some, you see it doesn't hold much paint. You get some nice texture in dry brush sort of thing, and I'm pretty sure this is the kind of thing that Andrew Wyeth was doing. And this would be nice on a stucco type surface. There's that one. I have one that's a little bit smaller and perhaps won't hold much paint. Could do a stroke like that. And let me see if I can do this. Let's get a little bit runnier. If you put, I'll set this down for a second. If you're going across the page like this, if you put more pressure on this edge or more pressure on this edge of the brush, in other words, don't pull it across evenly, you can get a different, so I'm going to do it with more pressure at the bottom. Well, let's see, I'll maybe get a little less paint on it. I'm getting more of a broken stroke at the bottom if I put more pressure there because I'm sort of squeegeeing. Hi, Kathleen. Because there's more pressure at the bottom edge of that stroke, I'm squeegeeing the paint and I'm getting more of a broken edge. Let's get some of that paint off. You don't want to have much paint on. Vicky, hello. 2 Vickies today. Now you could put more pressure at the top. Well, let's get less paint on the brush. And get a more solid edge at the bottom. Well, oop, darn, did it backwards. Less paint, less paint. It's good to have a tester sheet. And if you've got an irregular shape, like a stone, you know, some of this is block, some of this is small stone, some of this is irregular, like my basement. And you could put a little bit of shadow at the bottom while it's still wet. The next one, modify the color a bit, make it a little redder. So, I mean, we're just practicing now. A little blue on one side, maybe the light's coming from underneath or whatever. You just go by what we have. So, there's some tricks. Rinse these oil painting brushes off. Put them aside. Now we got to draw this monster. There's not a big draw here. We got a straight line that is a little bit past the halfway. I'm looking at this relationally. So, a little bit past halfway. So, I'll tell you a funny story when we were here. The apartment building over here, there was an older woman who, the deputy mayor of the town, Kwasi, was giving us a tour. So my horizon line, so to speak, is about here. It's a little above halfway, and there's a bit of a slant to it. And it kind of stops short of that. There's a farther back than that is where the little canal thing comes. And then we've got this business in here. I'm very light. You probably can't see this. I will darken them up later. That's generally a diagonal. So I'm going to indicate it for its position before I do the particulars of its shape, most of which I want to try and accomplish when I paint it. Now this is not, there's a because it's casting a shadow as well as a reflection. So it's back up here and the reflection is there. This comes down here. There's a little bush popping out there. Hold your pencil out to get the angle. Stops at about the quarter mark. Bush here. And I promise I'm going to draw darker once we get it going. Reflections. I'm going to paint that reflection. I am going to indicate where this reflection is. I'm noticing that is not like so. It's like so. And then there's also some indication of a bush or shrub here, which is just wonderfully placed to stop the eye from going out there. Now that is not level. Good heavens. I mean, if we're thinking 1000s, can't be, it's not new construction, right? Beautiful, beautiful church. One of the things I learned that about the woodwork inside it, if you don't want spiders, get all your trim in your house to be butternut. No, what was it? Wasn't hickory. It was one of those. But they knew this back then. Okay, so now that I've got the basics in here, I can start to find, notice that doesn't come all the way out to the edge. So we've got a bit of a pitch there, bit of a pitch here. And I'm just going to indicate where that is. Inside of that, a little bit. Coming down where this is, there is a... So hopefully you can see these lines getting a bit darker. So anyway, the deputy mayor of Quasi was leading us on a tour, and there was an older woman over here in this apartment building who was sunbathing en natural, and she was very, very disappointed with us for coming around there. And she was, I'm sure she's a nice lady, but she wasn't someone you would, of the age or that you would wish to attempt photography, but hello, Asya. It was something that we remember from our trip. Now I'm going to begin to find these wonderful spots here. There's a they had uncovered some painting on the wall behind the stuff that had been frescoed or mortared over or whatever. And really interesting. It's almost like they were putting graffiti on their church wall. Is there more up here than down here? Yes. Okay. So I'm not going to divide that in half. I'm going to divide it unequally. Where does this business start? I'm going to find those two verticals first. And I'm very much approaching this as if I were doing it plein air and I was on location. The photograph was taken from a little bridge back over here. So find that. And I'm not going to overdraw this, hopefully. Fingernail shape. for the beautiful deep stone feel of that. This is, I imagine, that's stonework. Okay. There's a lot of little detail up in here that I'm going to make occur when I'm painting the darker portions of the building. In other words, the shadows. The texture and all that stuff, it's this shadow shape, which sort of looks like, I don't know what, Idaho upside down, kind of. That's what's going to tell us a lot of the texture of that. I'm going to try to indicate some of the brick over here on this thing. There is and that lovely reflection, which, let's see, I only goes down here, so since I have so many straight edges here, might indicate where some of these corbel type things are going to be. There is a third window which does not reach the top of this and goes past the top of that for its bottom. So like I say, most of this is going to, oh, hello, Margaret, is going to occur in the painting stages. I just need to get the key curves and important lines. Need to come a little further down with that. So, having selected everything I want, I'm going to take out everything I don't want. Okay, construction lines, that sort of thing. This I need to. Where is the bottom of that? Where is that? So the palette today is going to be pretty simple. For this light portion of the stone, I'm going to use, I believe, I got a new color on the palette today. It will be this one. It's raw umber. It's a very neutral brown. It's not reddish. It's not gray. Well, it's kind of grayish. I might cool it down a little further with maybe some cerulean. The reason I'm choosing these pigments is because they tend to lift well. The iron oxides, ultramarine blue, yellow ochre, transparent oxide red, or burnt sienna will lift well. Cerulean and cobalt turquoise will lift well. Prussian blue will not. Indigo will not. Any of the like alizarin or alizarin substitutes like quinacridone rose will not lift well. I have a Naples yellow over here. Might use that. I don't know. Decisions. First decisions. My blues. Looking at both together. Oops. Come on. I'm looking at the sky, and it's a lighter blue than this part. So I'm probably going to bring that down through the greens, which are darker if we squint. And then I'm going to use maybe the same blue to here. Oops, come back. And then go to a darker blue. I'm going to try and mist this. My edges are going to be very soft and very tie-dyed for starters. And then we're going to come in when it's drier later, and we're going to get some very crisp marks that show texture and interest, and hopefully convey block and stone and mortar and roof tiles, that sort of thing. So, where do I want to go first? For example, here in the greens, the greens are darker than that. So if some of this gets in there, it's no big deal. The blue is lighter than the greens. When you squint, they stand out against the blue. So if some of the blue gets down in here, we don't have to worry. Where I don't want to have it come is maybe right in here. So I do have a dark reflection on this side from that shadowed side of the building. So if some of that blue creeps in there, I can recover it when I paint this very, very still reflection. So big brush, something on the order of a number 14 or 16 around. I'm going to get some raw umber, just mix it in here. A lot of water, runny mix. I am not going to be very dark with that. And then I think I'm going to have to cool it down a little bit with some lavender, which grays it. Now, a lot of water in this because it's going to be light. It is the lightest thing in the picture. Always I look for the plane above that which is the sky, the plane below which is the earth and or the water, and then the vertical planes of buildings and trees and things like that. At this time of morning, they are receiving some light, so these are a little darker, and these can be their local color, which is the color of the object, is showing pretty well. So I'm going to put that in for starters. And the roof is darker, so I can put it on the roof. Bring it down to here, down through here. Now it looks dark, but when these darker colors go in, then it will appear as it should. Leave maybe a few skips. Let's get fancy. Let's get a little bit of a runny Naples yellow or yellow ochre or something like that, and pop it in that area. So it's wet, it's runny paint into runny paint, so it's going to spread around. On its own. Let's put a little bit of burnt sienna into this mix. And get that over here, because there's some brick there. Might even pop a little of that in there for interest. Maybe some of the door, it's going to get darker brown. Maybe a little more lavender in areas on the left here. Now, our blues. Cerulean, just plain old cerulean, and a lot of water, but not as much water as before. Coming in here like that. Probably going to dry a lot lighter, so I'll put a little more in at the top. Now, what I'm going to do is over here in this puddle, I'm going to get some yellow ochre. And maybe some ultramarine or some cerulean. or the ultramarine. And I'm going to, we might call this the lighter portions of the foliage, because there are darker parts. So we're painting the light bits first, and I'm going to merge right down into, well, I'm going to put a little bit of brighter yellow into that, like the cad yellow light, in this vicinity, because that bush is bright, correct? And maybe a little bit here too. Let's get some Naples yellow and some cad yellow and pull for where the illuminated portion of the building is. Might even smuggle some of that in here too. This is runny paint into runny paint or onto dry paper. Now, we've got, let's put that into the blue here and go into the shaded area. That's going to get darker. There's that bush that stops the, let's put some burnt sienna into that, and some yellow ochre, and some cerulean blue to get an olive kind of color. And hope, ooh, let's get it bluer. Maybe some turquoise. Try to catch that wet edge, and maybe we can get that ugly, well, it's not ugly. It's the color of this reflection here, which is sort of olive, and I want to keep this wet. And if I can't get it, I might use a spritzer. Jackie, hello. Notice I'm holding it further away and just lubricating the paper, so to speak. Maybe a little raw umber in that even. And then having I'm putting the point there to keep a nice, wet, juicy edge. You can put a little of that right here at the bottom of that too. I am going to mix up some, I'm going to have to do it in an area. Fast, John, fast. More cerulean, water here. Because I did this earlier, I should get a relatively straight line, but if it does go in there, I do have the dark shaded bit to help me out. Now I'm going to get, and I'm wanting the water to be darker than the sky because it's reflecting the zenith. So now I'm getting into my ultramarine blue to get a darker blue, a little bit of water, a little of both. And off of that bead, coming down here and about there, because there's going to be some brown going into that too. Wet edges, lots of wet edges. Let's put a little bit of raw umber here. A little bit of raw umber there. Soft, wet edges. Lubricating that paper helped. I'm probably going to have to go a little darker here. Let's get some of this, some of that, and there's a shadow in here from that bush, from here too, and then back to our blues. Get some, there's some junk floating on the water, so we don't mind. Now, pop a little of that in there too. There's a shadow there. Here too. There is a cast shadow. And here we are, we're playing with this stuff, and we're Jackie. We're not even really painting texture or buildings yet. I am going to get some raw umber and a lot of water. And I'm going to come in here because that reflection needs to be just the tiniest bit darker than the thing that's causing it. And then the roof is going to come down here farther and darker, and we're going to execute that with a little more crispness, you'll see. Do I want to dry this? Maybe I think I'm going to look at it while it's still wet. What can I still do? I might put a little more of the yellow, which gets some blue in it and turns green anyway. I'm going to put that in here. Maybe a little more in here. A little more in here. Oh, maybe some turquoise too. Let it bleed into the reflections. Wet edges. Holy mess stage. Yeah. Okay, let us dry that. Rinsing, squeezing, mopping up the excess, so I don't get a blossom that heads back uphill. So cover your ears, here comes the hairdryer. All right, enough of that. Let me wet my whistle for a second. Thank you. First things first. We've done our lights and kind of some of our darks or our mediums. So I'm going to a slightly smaller brush. Here's the brush we were using. Here's the brush we'll now be using. It's a little stiffer bristle. My medium values, my roof, well, not the darkest darks are back in here. The shadows, the deep shade, some of the areas of the deep shade, perhaps in here. Okay, so I've got a pile of blue over here. I'm going to bring into that more ultramarine. Notice that there's some very, very similar colors here. And we don't want, this is farther away. We need this to be in front of that, and we need this to be in front of both. So we want to perhaps make these a little less zippy, a little less vibrant than these. So I'm going to get some turquoise, some ultramarine, and some yellow ochre. Which makes a green, but it's not the zippiest green. You can maybe even get a little bit bright yellow. Now, I'm going to get some of that paint off there by pulling it off. Now, once I put that down, I've got something of a wet edge there and here. I want to be careful there. Well, no, not to be careful, because that's going to be dark or darker still. I'm going to get a little bit of these yellows, and I'm going to pull up from and let them melt into this edge here. The reason I want them to melt is I don't want quite the level of shadow detail that I want to employ closer to us. Now, rinse that, blot that. More blue. Coming off of that wet edge, there's like a cast shadow by part of the building. This is darker wet paint into lighter wet paint. So darker meaning there's more pigment in it. So I'm going to actually even put a little bit of permanent alizarin into it to get it sort of purplish. Now I have to be careful that I don't paint into my bush here, or shrub. More blue. So it's getting creamier. It's getting it's slower moving. It's a higher concentration of pigment and a lower concentration of water. And I'm going to come down here and I'm going to get that diagonal shadow that's cast by, it's the shadow reflection combination that is coming out of these trees. And I might indicate a few things like that. Because its surface is wet, there's water on the surface, it's going to melt into, this paint is going to melt into it, and it will not be as distinct a mark as it would be if the surface was dry. Now, okay, there I'm going to put a little bit more of the it's some yellow ochre or a neutral Naples yellow. Naples yellow. I'm going to try and get this cast shadow on top of this. So we have reflections and we have cast shadows. So there's a lot going on here. And there are portions of, let's put some water with that. There are portions of this which are rather distinct. As I come down here, I'm going to put more of the yellow ochre and the regular yellows into this. Whoa, too much, John. Let's get some of this. There we go. That looks more like what we want. So it's very still water, so we can actually kind of paint what we're seeing there. Now, just above that, this edge is wet. There's some strong darks there. So I'm rinsing, blotting, and I'm going to go back to this strong, high pigment concentration purple mix. And I'm going to try to get some of these darks under there. So because this edge is wet and that edge is dry, I'm going to get a crisper mark at the top and a softer, we hope, mark at the bottom where the two meet. We hope. Touching in there. Oh, I hope it works. Here we go. All right. Yeah, I think we're getting there. Maybe even put some of that back here. be opportunistic. There's a strong shadow under here. Now, be careful, John, be careful. There's an olive shadow, so let's get that olive going. I'm going to use the yellow ochre and the ultramarine. These are higher concentrations of pigment because we're doing darker colors. I may need to get into my spritzing to keep that surface lubricated. So, a little bit, don't hose it down close. Keep a little bit further away and mist it. So, now I'm going to mix into that some burnt umber to get a browner mix. Maybe some of the raw umber even, to indicate that roof line. And with luck, this will happen. Then back into, let's get some turquoise or some blue. Touch into the darker bits of that and get that shadow here. Or reflection. I hope I'm not confusing everyone using different terms. The shadow and a reflection are not the same thing. Rinse, blot, more ultramarine, more alizarin, slow moving paint, coming right under that edge. Very dark there, very dark. That's going to get darker too. Don't worry about that. Now, raw umber with that. Maybe some yellow ochre. A dark olive. Coming out of this, I'm going to do the dark side of the reflection here. And there is a dark edge there because of the eave. And then let's put a little bit of water with that. It's funny, we're painting the reflection before we're painting the thing, right? Isn't that weird? Now, do not put as much detail into the reflection of the window as we put into... Oh, wait, well, yeah, that's... All right. I've underdrawn that. It should be a little further over, right? I'm going to put a little bit of lavender into this while it's wet. And a little bit of lavender and a little bit of this and some water. It's a reflection. It doesn't have to be detailed like a building. How about some ultramarine into that? Put a strong dark right at the edge. Well, we do need a strong dark right in there. Now, I know I always talk about we do lights to darks, but sometimes if you want the edge of the dark to be soft, you may need to execute it while the surface is in the condition that you need it to be. If you need it to melt in, you need some water in it. That's you're going to have to sort of execute it on the fly. This side of the building, the blue with a little bit more water, maybe some lavender or turquoise to cool it. It's a dark, cool. Skips. Let's get a little more lavender coolish down here. This is the Holbein lavender color. It's a mixture of ultramarine blue, titanium white, and some sort of reddish purple component. Now, okay. Smuggle a bit. Oh, you know what? We need more. While this is wet, let's get some dirty yellow, which is going to become green. Hi, Deb. You see my hair? Yeah, let it go, Deb. I'm back to, I tell people I'm back to where I was in 11th grade. So, let's get a little bit of that in here too. While this edge is still wet, we can take advantage of that. This is a marvelous little town, Croissy. It's the world headquarters of Boursin cheese. Although if you buy Boursin cheese in the United States, it's probably manufactured in Canada because they have stuff all over the world. And the deputy mayor of Croissy, Jackie, his wife worked at the headquarters there. He was a character. Oh my goodness. Coolest guy. Sharon, new friends, hello. How about I let these colors wait. Maybe a little more ultramarine, a little more purple for that. I do need this to stand out. And I want it to be soft. I don't want it to be stiff. So, likewise here. Maybe even a few dark marks in there. It's still damp. Okay. Yeah. Well, blotting the brush, rinsing, blotting the brush. I think I better go back, get some more of that rich royal purple. Touch in at key places here too. There are strong darks there. And it's a good eye stopper for here. You've got a strong diagonal running your viewer's eye out of the page. You want to rein it in if you can. Otherwise, you risk sending them on to the next person's picture, which we don't want. Okay, now I think I'm sort of dry enough there that I'm going to get some yellow ochre and some strong yellow. Strong yellow being, in this instance, the cad yellow light. And I'm going to pull across here, leaving, I hope, a bit of the original behind to get a strong sense of the light. Then into that I'm going to mix a fair amount of cerulean or cobalt or even Prussian to get a bluish green, which I will come across underneath that, catch the wet edge, and it'll bleed uphill a bit. And hopefully this will look like a shadow. Let's even get some of that purple in there. As I get close to the water's edge there, I'm going to maybe even smuggle in some burnt sienna. Just where it touches the water's edge. We may come back and put a very dark mark there. You can get some indigo. Okay, now I think this I really want to dry so that I don't accidentally smear it while I'm executing the, well, we can do the roof. You won't have to listen to the horrible hairdryer. Burnt umber. Right up the middle brown, run it into this green. A little bit of ultramarine blue to tone it down. Well, there's some red in there, isn't there? Let's get some alizarin. I see some red in there. I'm going to see it sort of picks it up and leaves a footprint. This is a slow-moving paint. It doesn't move very fast. Start up here, and I'm going to start on the tape, overlap the tape. If I can get a little bit of brokenness in there, and I'm not getting a little bit of brokenness, using my Pinky-as-a-Mall stick, there's an Eve over there. Let's get a bit of red. And I'm using a paint that is a similar consistency to this, so that when I put it in here, it melts in and it doesn't leave a distinct mark. And it doesn't create a light spot. If it was too runny, if what I put in here was runnier than that, I would get a light spot. If what I put in here was more pigment and less water than that, then I would get a dark, more distinct mark. So neither one of them is right or wrong. It's what you need to get at that particular moment. This is about to the stage, I'm putting my head to the side and I'm looking across it. And that light mark there's a shadow in here, a cast shadow. So I'm getting some ultramarine, mixing into that. Maybe a little bit of more raw umber or something. And I'm going to try and execute that darker shadow that's under the, well, it's too early, it's too early. Maybe not. Maybe not. Perhaps not. We'll see. Okay. I don't want to make too big a deal of the reflection because it is the reflection. This, I want to get a little more action out of that. But I need to come in. Okay. A strong dark. Raw umber. Ultramarine. Now this is very slow moving paint. And it's almost an indigo on its own, but, well, let's use burnt umber and ultramarine. Very, very slow moving. Not moving, actually. Hi, Becky. I'm going to leave a light spot to maybe indicate that guttering. Maybe I need a little more water than that. That's just maybe perhaps too slow moving. Okay, now some burnt sienna or some burnt umber and some lavender. Try to execute this shadow, that weird shape. Now I've got a stopping point. There's a corbel of some sort, and then I've got a shadow over here that's not the same. I've got this dark one, and then I've got this, and corbels are helping me. Well, they're not corbels. I guess they are even some turquoise, maybe. They're the previous construction from earlier. So it's an irregular shape, and as it goes down, it becomes less of these colors, the blue and the turquoise, and it becomes more yellow ochre, rinsing, blotting. I'm just looking for abstract shapes here. Maybe I'll even put a little sienna into it, and some yellow and some Naples. Lavender. It modulates a lot. There's a lot of color modulation in this. It's sort of, to me, very interesting. A little bit of that under the window. Now, the bluer portion of that coming underneath this thing, going up to here. Let's get it bluer still. Let's go straight up lavender. Rinse. Get that slow moving lavender. Maybe even a little turquoise. Stops about there, picks up on the other side of the downspout, hooks into that dark. Now, while that's wet, we've been talking about putting a consistency of paint into something that's already there and maintaining the same consistency so that they don't create a blossom or a distinct mark. So I'm going to put some of this yellow ochre, Naples yellow mix in here at the top edge of that and let it bleed down. There's some of that in the interior portion of that arch. Now, you need to go back to this blue, which is the lavender and the turquoise, again, slow moving, and come across to this shadow and meet that there. Part of that's covered too, isn't it? Okay, this is more complicated than I thought it would be, right? But textures, that's what I'm going for. And there will be glazing later. Are any of these colors, am I seeing anything like them? This ochre lavender mix seeing some of that inside when I squint at the window, I see it everywhere. There are some architectural details in there which I am going to lift as opposed to trying to paint around. Fear not, there will be some darker elements going into both of those things. All of that I'm seeing is sort of this. All of the interior there I will lift if I need it. So we're starting to get our building. I hope you can see that. While that is wet, I'm going to go in with a strong dark up here. So that's our go-to alizarin and ultramarine dirty purple. Inside of that door, to the left of that, some mix of burnt sienna and all the umbers for a deep, rich, but not zippy brown. Well, let's put it both in there and let it melt together. Okay, I'm not going to deal with this yet. I'm tempted, but I won't. That is still too damp to mess with. I'm going to put some ultramarine in this to make it slower moving yet. Maybe a little bit of the alizarin. Rinse that brush, blot it to get all the water out. Get a footprint, which means there's not much paint in the brush. Going sideways, not like this, going sideways. I'm going to try to suggest some of that minor texture from the shakes of the roof. I could work over here, that's dry. I want a ruddier, browner brick kind of texture there. Rinse, blot, kind of runny paint. Let's get a little red in there. I'm going to paint individual bricks because we're not at the scale that's appropriate for painting individual bricks. We are at the scale that's appropriate for showing the shadow underneath a capstone type something or the other. Brown or red, a reddish dark. That's all we need for that, I think. Perhaps some darks in here. All right, let's dry this. And then we're going to get into our textures, brick textures. All right, here we go. I may need to go to well, no. I'm going to stay with the Oriental brush, and this mix here with more water and maybe a little bit of turquoise or lavender to make a cool grayish color. I'm going to try to get this face of that. Anywhere else do I see that? Get in here. Get in here. Now, I do need a darker version of that. Oh, maybe not that dark. Let's get over here. And a little bit of brown. Where that comes down there. Gonna need to make my roof probably darker. Okay. Leave that alone. If I'm smart. Let's get some of this burnt umber. Maybe some raw umber. Get the darkest dark spot under that. Let's put a little bit of turquoise in that. That. Maybe a little more ultramarine to make it darker still. Suggest. That's what I want to do is suggest here. The more olive mixture. Okay. Door. Now, this area in here where there's stone, I'm going to get a smaller brush. I'm going to get this scruffy little brush that's very old, and I'm going to clean out an area in here. Probably didn't need to do that. Gonna get some yellow ochre, some burnt sienna, some Naples yellow. See how scruffy it is? Maybe a little bit more water. Blot the brush. I'm gonna try to texture appropriate for this level of, or for this scale. It does get a little more grass, you know, where it's trimmed next to the building. That plus a lot of water. Blot the brush, get a small amount of it, make a footprint, scruffy brush, up in here. Taking advantage of the paper here to suggest the ancient texture. Get some of that more. Now over here in this section, it appears it's newer and there's a little bit more there's some block. It's irregular. It's lovely irregular. There are some spots where there are some darker bits. I have friends checking in here. Sorry about that. Add a bit of architectural detail here. Not enough to overdo it. I want it to just look kind of ancient. Get some browns. Blotting, rinsing. Squint, and if you see more horizontal lines than vertical lines, or vice versa, the ones that appear after you've done squinting. Paint some of the lines between the blocks. Basically, if you squint wherever you see it, that's where you put it. Just want it to look nice and ancient. Okay. Long straight lines along roofs or gutters or things of that sort avoid making them continuous. Try to show enough to say, well, that's what's going on there. And leave it at that. When you want to clean up lines, get a feel for where is my light coming from. It's tending to come from in here. So make the right side, or the side that the light is coming from, the sharper edge, and let the other side be perhaps more irregular. Okay, I think I'm at the point where I'm almost getting a little bit too... I'm going to show some roof. Now, a roof, if you're showing tiles or shingles, remember the roof is pitched. It's not flat, it's pitched. So you're going to see more of the detail at the edge that's closer to you, which is down here, and less as it goes further back up. Now I'm going to tint that light spot there so that gutter looks like it's whatever it is. Okay, now the one last thing I want to do, let's get a strong darks. There is something back there. Not getting as much shadow action as I want there or here or here. Now I want that, that needs to be a green, doesn't it? A dark green. Bluish green. Whoa, 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 whoa. Be careful. Take a little of that, put it somewhere else. There's my scruffy brush. Put some water with that and a bit of yellow. Okay, let's peel and see what we're getting. So the big idea is first make sure that the kind of detail or texture that you're going to put in is appropriate for the scale that you're working. Oops, I'm going to leave that there and I'm going to put, John. There was one more thing I wanted to do, and I need tape on there to do it. I need to make this area darker. Pay attention to what you're doing, John. Puddle of ultramarine and or cerulean. Now I want to ease into that darker blue softly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put water above where I want it to happen and then come in. So there's a wet line, blot that brush, pick up the paint, Keep the bead going. Maybe get a little more paint. There we go. That's better. Now, let's see. Yeah, well, I better pick up the excess at the bottom. So the trick there was I didn't want a hard line where that happened. I wanted a soft line, so I put water above where I wanted it to start and worked into that. So let's see what we're getting here. I think we're in the ballpark, but so the point I was trying to make there, make sure that the level of texture or indication of the brick or block or stone is appropriate for the scale that you're working. The more of it you want to show, the larger you need to work. See if just some basic texture gotten from a brush or the roughness of the paper will do the job. I think we could still be a titch darker in there too. So yep. That's better. When it dries, I think that'll be better. And more of that purple. That's a dark hole right there. And this is a dark hole right here. And it's important that this is dark because it makes the water and that area back, that deep shadow back there, look transparent. So, to review, oh, well, thank you. Yes, and also thank you all for suggesting these sorts of things, because more than likely, I have a subject that I'm wanting to paint, would love to paint, that fits what we're trying, the request. There we go. No, I'm not going to fool with it anymore. I'm going to let it dry and look at it. So, if you are far from the building, keep the texture kind of broad and just get those key cracks or crevices or deep spots. If there's a lot of texture, such as here or here, but you're far away, don't try to paint the bricks. Just paint that broader textural content. Use pigments that lift, like ultramarine, burnt umber, burnt sienna, raw umber, yellow ochre, and then if you have to put down a medium to darkish wash when it's dry, you can lift out a light spot. Suggest your texture more in the front than in the back. So, oops, I'm showing a little more here than I am here, and none back here. when you do bricks that are showing through stucco or or an even brick wall, don't show them all. Show the ones that squint and see which ones are really showing, and the viewer's imagination will lay that whole brick wall for you. Use the character of the pigment for he's using ultramarine in a very wet state. Some of those umbers to get texture out of what the pigment will do. And, look at your subjects and see how you might treat the different things. Also, boy, there's some other things that I didn't do that we could have done. Splatter into it. It wouldn't have been appropriate at this scale. But thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed that. I enjoyed painting it. It's a lovely little place. Ancient. So everybody stay safe, stay sane, and peace out. Thank you, everyone.